I know that when I first became aware of your work, it was your gaitas,
Ah,
because I'm a highland bagpiper initially.
right.
I'm now a very enthusiastic Scottish small piper. I'm trying to learn uilleann pipes. I've recently started playing flute, and that's where I've got a Carbony flute. But I've wanted to play gaitas for a very long time, and so kind of constantly shopping around, I've landed on on the Carbony gaita page so many times and been like, one day, someday, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Cool.
But and I was thinking about how, like, it's special, like I've got this flute now, you know, and it's like an instrument isn't just an accessory, we kind of pour some of our soul into the instruments we have, of course, and it's just kind of special that, like, I'm holding my Carbony flute right now and just thinking about how I
Right.
was playing it just this morning, and I'm going to play it again this afternoon. I pack it in my bag every afternoon when I'm done at my office to take it into the house and take it out to my parents' house and play for them and all. And you made this, I'm talking to you. You put hands on this. There's something special
Yeah.
about that. So it's special for me to be talking to you. It's very cool. But so I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, Rob. I'm curious to know. I'm kind of thinking, okay, Rob of Carbony. I want to know. There are like two streams here that came together at some point. First of all, music. Why? What got you into this kind of music in the first place? Where did that all start? And then on the other hand, carbon fiber, how did that happen, and when did they come together? So maybe we start with music. Could you tell me about your childhood a little bit? Like, did you grow up in a musical home? Did you have siblings who played music, parents who encouraged you? Like, what was that like? Where did you first come into music in general, and when did it get specific to some instruments?
Well, so pretty much is since my parents weren't particularly music. I mean, my mom always played music in the house on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom's side of the family, whenever we went to visit my grandparents, it was like one of the things we play solitaire, and of course we eat. But one of the things they had, like, this is in the day of LPs, they had like
Mm.
quite a collection of everything from, oh, I don't know, Perry Como to Cannonball Adderley or whatever. So
Mm.
they play a game where someone would put on an album, and everyone else in the room would have to guess who it
Oh, I
was.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it but since I was really young, anytime I saw a piano, I used to like run to it. Um,
Mm.
and there was one house in particular where I was told that you're not old enough to do that. But anyway, I've always wanted to
Not
play
old
music.
enough, really.
Yeah, well, this is when I was 3 or 4, and it's like, until you have lessons, you can't touch my piano, type of
Oh, wow.
thing.
Yeah.
But so it was a little, we didn't have one at home. But so as soon as I could start taking music in elementary school, I would.
Mm.
And so I started out on the clarinet, and I played that in one school system in Texas. They started you at fifth grade, and then we
Mm.
moved to Georgia, and they didn't let you start till the seventh grade. So I got like just a little teaser, and then I
Oh.
had to quit because we moved when I was in the fifth grade. So, but anyway, so I was really gung ho, and I used to love to practice and spend a lot of time with the clarinet. I ended up being in high school band, a classic band nerd, but I ended up making high school, I mean, all state band for the state,
And that
and
was in Georgia still?
that was in Georgia. Yeah, I spent all
Gotcha.
my so it's been a big part of my life, and also, when you're in high school, you're dealing with a lot of stuff that's not in your control, and I would
Mm.
use music and practicing as my escape. So,
Ah,
no matter what
beautiful.
was going on, music would release me and take me away and bring me to places that I wanted to go. So
That
yeah, so for me, a lot of music was, and I, even though I played band music and actually participated in some orchestras and stuff, I really loved, this was a lot dating myself, but
mm.
Led Zeppelin was coming out with albums then, and they were very underground, and
Mm.
not, it was a secret thing I had with my friends because my parents never listened to that kind of music. So I took to that and started my own album collection, and went to concerts as much as I could. And then I got to college, and I kind of had to I got an engineering degree at MIT, so I had to really devote a lot of time to my studies. So I kind of quit playing music formally in a group. But then I did at MIT, you have to have a humanities concentration. So that means that you, you, you had to take a diversity of humanities classes, but you had to specialize in one. And
Mm.
that specialty for me was the study of psychoacoustics, which is the perception of sound or music on the human brain. So
Oh, that sounds
I
very interesting.
yeah, it was a trip. So, but in order to get that concentration, I had to do like the history of Western music, and learn about the Baroque era and the Renaissance,
Yeah.
and up through the Romantic and the modern classical. And I ended up actually taking an opera class from John Harbison, who was a contemporary composer at the time, doing a residency at MIT. So I got
Wow.
really exposed to quite a lot of stuff. Also got to write a computer program that, so if you take we were taking Vivaldi's Winter, um, he did the Four Seasons, and we just
Right.
took,
Yeah.
and if you look at it, it's very mathematical. He plays a phrase, and then he does an inversion, and then he goes back and plays it again, and then he
Mm.
takes it up a third. So we wrote a program that would kind of, that if you gave it these four notes that the Winter starts with, it'll go through and generate. We were trying to generate the whole piece, and it did for the most part. But the idea was if you took that algorithm and gave it four different notes, would it still sound like music, or what music would it sound like?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a neat project that I also did in a different one of my classes of computers and music was that class. So I got and I also took some physics class about how the ear works and how we don't hear lower frequencies
Yeah.
at lower volumes, and that's why they developed something called the loudness button. They don't know if they put that on stereos anymore, but used to be a fixture on all high end stereos. And basically, what that button did is, as you turn the volume up, it boosts the bass at low volume, but as you turn the knob up, the amount of bass that it boosts decreases. So it knows the frequency response of the human ear, and it
Oh,
try based on volume, and it tries to compensate for it. So a lot of people just say, "Oh, the loudness button just makes it louder or boosts the bass," but it actually is making it seem, it's adjusting the EQ is what it's actually doing. So
I had no idea. I've used loudness buttons, certainly, but I had no idea that that was what it was doing.
yeah, nobody, and 99% of the people have no idea what it does, but
Yeah.
that was that figuring that. So I'm kind of a geek, and anytime I see a button, I need to understand exactly, not just, I want to know exactly what's going on behind in the black box, not just saying, oh, it makes it louder. So
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is fun that I'm like already seeing the sprinklings of how like engineering and tech come together with like the musical instrument making,
yeah,
with the music
absolutely.
itself.
It's really just a physics equation, because you're trying to get a tube or a cylinder or a cone to oscillate at a certain, to make a certain note with a certain resonance value. So, and then when you open and close notes, you're changing the resonance of the instruments of the wavelength. And so
Yeah.
there's some pretty neat equations that govern open-ended and closed-ended columns. So
Mm.
um,
Very cool. So throughout all of this experience, did you ever get to kind of live out that childhood dream or, that draw you had to the piano specifically? Did you ever get to sit in front of some keys for a while for lessons, or is that
Yeah.
still?
So at MIT, in order to get a concentration in music, one of the classes that you had to take was actually piano.
Yeah.
So I actually did take piano from, oh, I forget his name, but anyway, it was a Polish piano player, lived in Cambridge for quite a while, and he was also in residency at MIT. But anyway, I did take a couple semesters, and I was able to actually learn piano. But piano for me has always just been a visual representation of the Western scale. And so I
Interesting.
quickly after I graduated, I started playing music again, and actually I took a composition class at MIT, so I was doing a little bit of composing, and I had a Casio, one of those little mini Casio keyboards that I would
Hmm.
play with and just have around, not because it was a great keyboard, but because it had the notes on it, and I could turn it on and off and go work with melodies and stuff. So
I love that. That's how I first started learning piano on not a Casio brand, a knockoff little
yeah,
Casio electric piano. But I think that's so interesting to hear you say that like the piano is useful as a like a visual representation of the Western scale. Because like
yeah,
my personal experience with music has been my first exposure was piano, and it was pitched to my parents and to me as like this is a starting point to help
right,
you to get like familiar with music in general. And then if you
right,
pursue piano after that, fine. But if you don't, it's still like
right.
that picture of the keys, those black and white keys, is going to be useful whatever instrument you pursue thereafter.
And to be fair, my mom did end up getting an old upright piano when I
Mm.
think we moved to Georgia soon afterwards. Just when we finally got a house that we were kind of going to stay in for a while.
Yeah,
So,
you
so
don't want
we
to have to be
it
moving a
wasn't
piano
anything
around.
fancy, but it was you could get upright pianos for the cost of digging them out of someone's house back then. I think you still
Yeah.
can. So
Yeah, true enough. So do you remember like the reaction in your household to your initial learning of the clarinet? Because that's an instrument that can be pretty squeaky, when a kid's first learning. Was it
yeah,
all encouragement, or was there ever like a hey, you're killing my houseplants, take it out to the shed?
no, so my family went through different transitions, and I was going to say, no, my mom was very supportive and she was busy working most of the time anyway. So that wasn't a big deal. But I did have a stepfather for a short period of time, and we did live on 3 acres in the woods. So he would send me out to the woods. Now that you mention it, I had totally forgotten that. But and most of the time I would just practice in my room, and I wouldn't. And I ended up getting a bass clarinet and using that with the high school band, and that instrument. It's a little octave lower. I mean, I suppose you're going to squeak and squawk for a little bit, but it
Yeah.
seems to go pretty quick. I don't know. It's I didn't. It, I do remember playing outside in the woods sometimes, but
That's delightful. Like I think the nervousness that I get when doing an interview is making it hard for me to remember the name of the piece. But that famous one's like dun 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 dun
yeah,
dun 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 dun.
yeah, that's yeah, I know who you're talking about.
I, I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to. My head can only come up with the boy who cried wolf. I'm like, no, that's a story. That's
Right.
not the song. That's not.
Tchaikovsky is Peter and the Wolf by
Oh, Peter
Tchaikovsky.
and the Wolf. That sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the instrumentation that you had in your hands even just fits so well. I love to imagine that you went out in the woods and played those melody lines in the woods.
Yeah, I mean, usually we had stuff we were working on for band, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I also love imagining, Rob, the idea of, I mean, like Led Zeppelin, of course, is so huge today that, people will wear Led Zeppelin shirts without ever having listened to Led Zeppelin music because it's a
right.
it's a huge thing. And the experience of having it be like an underground secret thing for you and your friends, I find that just, I don't know, charming, exciting, cool.
It was bizarre to finally hear some of it on like commercials for like products and
Yeah,
stuff. Like
right,
back
yeah.
then, it's like, no, this is stuff that when you turned your car, so we all had car stereos that we liked to crank up, and if people heard you, they would wonder what noise was coming out of your vehicle.
Yeah. So your Vivaldi project sounds really interesting. Do you have, because like I don't know much about computers or music, if I'm honest. I'm happy to be going along for the ride here. I feel very confused. I'll tell you what, man, I am still just absolutely confused about how sound especially with a record player, gets
Yeah.
a stationary object that's, well, it's not stationary because it's being turned in circles, but how does it get from the surface of a physical object through a needle, then through chords, then to a speaker, and then I hear it and it sounds like trumpets or pianos or vocal,
Yeah,
it's still magic, man. I do not understand what's in that black box. But
yeah. It's there's a little tiny groove with little perturbations, and
it's
and
still
you
it's
got a
still
little
magic to
needle
me there.
that's barely weighted on it. That's picking up all that is hooked up to some wires that it's vibrating, and that vibration is the actual frequencies of the music.
That's
So
just amazing.
yeah,
But I've played around with AI a little bit recently.
yeah,
Not that long ago, I had a commission to do a Highland bagpipe piece for a wedding reception.
right,
And I hope that this doesn't cheapen it necessarily, right? But like I was having a hard time getting started. And so I asked an AI chatbot, "Hey, can you look at the Scotsguard collection of
right,
bagpipe tunes?" And it said, "Yes, I can." And so I said, "Okay, could you get me started with 2/4 March, or maybe it was a 6/8, one or the other." I asked it to get me started with one or the other, and it busted out a two-part tune that
right.
was okay. And it's interesting
Okay.
to me that you mentioned that like
Yeah,
you started with 3 or 4 notes and then would see what
yeah.
what your computer program could come up with when you're at MIT, because it did seem like it devolved. Even this AI, when I asked it to do that, it started out like reasonably strong. By the
Right.
end, it was very, like, I want to say binary. It was basically just hitting
Okay.
2 or 3 notes in really regular patterns. It was still useful to me because it got me started. I used the first part to get started and I made it into a tune. But it was interesting to see how that happened. And I don't know what I'm going for here, Rob, other than just like, do you ever do that yourself? And is it at all reminiscent of that experience that you had in college building a program that maybe did something similar?
I haven't done a lot of playing around with AI yet or generating music. It might use the same thing. This was brute programming. I was like, okay,
Right.
let's take this, and that's probably something that an AI might do, is like in the style of Vivaldi's Winter, generate a tune, and it might go through and analyze the piece and say, oh wow, there's these patterns and this is how he does it, so I'll do. An AI could explicitly do something like that. It may very
Hmm.
well, and it wouldn't be any more creative than what I did. But so I mean, that would be a method that AI might use. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
I think it's really fun to hear you talk about how mathematical, like in particular Vivaldi's Winter might be, where like I feel like I've never been very good at math personally. In
right.
fact, there was one time, the most recent math class I took was several years ago, but I was taking like a night course and it was algebra, and
Okay.
my sweet wife was staying up late every night helping me do homework because she understood it better than I did. I just have a hard time with math. And at one point, I was working out a problem, an algebra problem, that ends up lines and lines long trying to find X or something. And I fell asleep. But when I woke up, I seemed to have continued writing as I was falling asleep because I didn't remember writing it. But at the bottom of this long trail of this algebraic equation, it just says X equals bad day, and I'd fallen asleep. So I've never been good with math, but I've heard mathematicians talk about how like once you get deep enough into it, it becomes like art. It's like a creative experience.
Yeah.
I
It
believe them.
leads you
I don't.
places.
I've never been there,
Yeah.
and I
No.
think
Physics
just
and math are
yeah.
linked. So if you can solve a problem in math, and then you have some stuff in the real world that's governed by those same equations, then
Mm,
as you do the math, you should find a physical reality. It's kind of how they figured out that black holes exist,
mm,
because you can't really see them. So you can
mm.
model them with math, and then you can look for the signs of what that might look like in space, and then you can,
Ah, yeah.
if they exist, even though you can't detect them, you can detect the signature, the mathematical signature of how light bends, and with a lot of these new telescopes, that not only confirmed it, they can pinpoint exactly where they are.
That I just got goosebumps. The idea of like math making it so you can see things that you can't see. Like, ooh, that
Yeah.
was cool. But I like having how you described finding, like, kind of doing it in reverse order, going from this piece of art and finding that there's math in the art rather than going from
Right.
math and finding that there's art in the math. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
Right.
pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So then how did, like, between you had your interest in music and then you're taking these engineering courses, etc. Then where did carbon fiber come into it? Because, like, the only two carbon fiber products that I own is a hard hat that I wear on job sites and this flute. And those are very different items, like, where did the idea come from? Like, oh, carbon fiber, this thing that they use for, like, bulletproof vests and truck liners and stuff. I could make bagpipes out of that. How did that happen?
So I mean, I went into engineering school, and I'm a product engineer and product development engineer and
Mm,
manufacturing engineering. I kind of dabble in all that kind of stuff. And my first job out of college was test product engineer for microprocessors. So as
mm.
they were released, as designs were released, I would be on a team of people that would make sure that we could ship these products reliably and consistently to the rest of the world. And so we had to do testing and quality and stuff. And then later on, I got involved with inkjet print cartridges with Hewlett Packard. So I spent 10 years
You're
with
a wonderful person, Rob, but those ink cartridges are the bane of my existence personally. I don't think
well,
that's your fault. I just can't
no,
help
they were having big recall rates, and I actually helped develop traceability systems but during
Mm,
manufacturing, so we could figure out when we had a return, what day it came out of the factory, what tooling path did it have, and so we wouldn't have to. It would help us diagnose the problem. So if
oh, yeah.
90% of what we're making is fine and 10% is bad, without this capability, we would have to recall all of the parts until we understood which
Mm,
10%, what was bad about the 10%. If I could immediately tell you everything that came out of this tool on this day since this time was bad and everything else seems to be absolutely fine, I have statistical data to reinforce it, then
mm.
we can quarantine either those parts, but even more importantly, we can go look at what happened to that tool on that day, either the maintenance records or the
Mm,
tuning records or whatever, and then actually fix the problem. So, but one of the things when you're doing, so I've been involved in product development and release, and one of the things that you do when you're designing or making a new product is you list out what are all the things that a customer would want out of an instrument, or out of any product, and you say,
mhm,
well, they absolutely important is that it has to be in tune, and it has to have the range of notes.
mhm.
Uh, Something else that would be nice but not a requirement is that it would be indestructible. Something that
Yes,
would be
yeah.
nice, but isn't a part of the thing today, is that it would be stable across different temperatures and humidities. And so like
Mm,
wooden instruments aren't, but if it would that be of value to the customer? It's like, yeah, that means it would stay in tune. So you
right.
can make all these lists of requirements, and then you can look at a list of materials that you could make it. And so you can list wood is traditionally what it's made from, but then you do a brainstorm of bamboo, of carbon fiber, of aluminum. You can list everything. And if you do, it's called a matrix. And if you do this customer prioritization matrix, and you put all the numbers in, like this is a must have, and this is you can rank all the materials, and carbon fiber comes up pretty high on the list. Its only detriment is it can be a little bit of expensive, but the
Mm,
neatest thing about it is it's very, very repeatable. So rather than
mm,
reaming out a piece of wood and having to make adjustments for the density of different parts of that wood, you can make the most important part of any instrument to create the same intonation and sound and notes is the bore. And if you can make the bore repeatable, then you've got a repeatable product.
mm,
And so rather than reaming out a piece of carbon fiber, we start with a steel mandrel that's been precision ground to the exact geometry that we need the inside of the instrument, and we roll the carbon fiber up on it. So
oh,
it's a
gotcha.
very unique way to make a very repeatable product. And then the other piece of it is it's very stable in temperature and humidity, so it doesn't go out of tune. And then most importantly, so this is what we wanted to start with, is we really want it to have the same density and fiber structure as its replacement, which would be African blackwood or ebony.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's an engineered material, and we can dial in how much, and carbon is the main molecule in trees too. So we can dial in the density of the fiber versus the epoxy to get it to match African blackwood. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so this is why if we make an instrument that's say the same geometric, inside and outside, and has the same density as wood, and have the fibers running the length of the instrument, you actually get pretty indistinguishable resonance from that of wood. So that's what that was our goal.
That is interesting. Wow. I had not I mean, I know nothing of how carbon fiber functions, and so I had not realized that you could dial in, like, the density
Yeah,
of the material to start with. That's really interesting. And the
yeah, and
wrapping thing too, that's like I know that of course the traditional maker will, bores out the piece of wood and puts it on a lathe and everything. And I've
yeah,
heard makers talk about how like the challenge with like polypenco, right, or durlin for synthetic bagpipes or other similar instruments is that like you still basically you're probably still tooling it in the same traditional way, so there's still a lot of like wasted product, right? Because you just get a solid
yeah,
chunk of polypenco
yeah.
and ream it out and turn it down, and it's all the same, and so you still lose a lot of material in that way. I hadn't realized. So it's like a sheet, and you wrap it into the precise shape instead, huh?
Right. Yeah. So what it is if you have I think we call them mandrels, and that's
Mm,
basically the inverse of the bore of the instrument. And so, like for my flutes, I have 7 different tapers down the body, and
mm,
they used to do that with it's a replica of a 1859 Pratt flute, and those
mm,
all those individual tapers were generally hand done and tuned as they were finishing the instrument. But they,
mm,
with wood, it's just because you cut a tree down doesn't mean it's dead on that day. You have to let it dry out. You have to
yeah.
ream it. You have to let it age. And even then, if you've really, it still is changing with temperature and humidity just because of the nature of it. Even if you keep your flute, well oiled and stuff. So
Mm,
we kind of eliminate all that. And the other nice thing is with the flute, you get a better sound if it has a polished interior. So I spend a lot of time polishing the inside of the flute. If I polish the outside of this metal, the carbon and the resin takes that polish. So you get that finish on the,
oh, so
without
it's like
touching the inside
pre-polished
at
kind
all.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
So,
cool. So you like kind of assembling the spreadsheet of like must-haves and desirables and then
right.
narrowing down potential materials. Had you had any hands-on experience with carbon fiber previous to this, or was it like, well, I guess carbon fiber might be a candidate. I'll start looking into that now. Like, was it fresh and new to you?
It was always something. I mean, I had a bicycle made out of carbon fiber.
Oh, cool.
I think there was somebody in Massachusetts developing a fiddle out of carbon fiber, a violin.
Mm,
Um, but it wasn't being used for this a whole lot. But I was just like, it, it kind of just, I thought it would be cool, number one. And when I researched it, its density was really, was in the range of wood. And
mm,
as I did more research, I found I could make it match it. And to be clear, especially with bagpipes and some of the wooden flute makers, they always sought out the hardest wood on the planet. So when they
yeah.
ran out of ebony, they started using grenadilla. It,
Hmm.
it's the reason that bagpipes are made out of it's because of wood imported from Africa is because there wasn't any more hardwood in Scotland. So
Mm, yeah.
um, so if you're building a violin and you have a soundboard or a guitar and you have sort of the soundboard that's, you don't want that to be super dense because it's required that it vibrates to get
Yeah.
sound out of it. So you have an equation where you're trying to find an optimal with with wooden instruments and bagpipes. It seems that every maker has always gone toward, I'm trying to make this as dense as possible. I'm trying to find the densest wood. So that's a much easier equation to solve. I'm going to try and
Mm.
make the carbon fiber as dense as possible. And
Yeah.
I can actually dial in to be about 5% denser than African blackwood. So
Ah.
you get a little variation, and so I can easily say that it's right at it. So it's not a problem. So
Yeah, I'm always like, even after decades, I'm always surprised when I take my pipes apart to oil the stalks and the drones. Just like I tap a couple stalks together, and it's like they're stone. They're just
yeah,
so. And I'm talking about my ebony pipes. They're just like
yeah,
so hard and so dense.
yeah,
It's remarkable that can be an organic product. Really,
yeah,
it's surprising. So then why? Because so I talked to Gemma
yeah,
of Gemma Bagpipes fame a little while ago, and she's like one of your like brand ambassadors or something along those lines, right? She has some of your
yeah.
instruments. And she had mentioned, I think, if I remember right, that you, as far as your instruments go that you make, you came to like this sort of piping and other trad instruments world first via the gaita. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, my first bagpipe was a gaita. That's what I had been
How did
playing.
that happen? Because you're not from Spain, as far as I understand. So
No, but I have
where'd that come from?
so talking more about my music history, I always, I played in a high school band. When I graduated, I started playing some punk style rock in Boston. And so that became something that I had a lot of fun with. And then I played in a symphony orchestra for a little while. And then I got a job out west and I moved to Corvallis. And, I enjoy all music, and the
Yeah,
engineer.
you were a real genre hopper there, weren't you, Rob?
Yeah. And well, I just love music and I like different types of music, and every type of music has a different message and a different way of communicating. And each energy is different, but they're all like pure. And the person across the aisle from me was picking up a fiddle, Irish fiddle, after not only having played it in high school, and she went to a Kevin Burke concert in Portland and was just really impressed, and she ended up buying a fiddle at a garage sale, and for maybe a couple $100, and she went and got it
Mm,
appraised and it was worth a few $1,000s. So she said, well, this must
nice.
be a sign of something. So she
Yeah.
hooked up with Kevin. After Kevin Burke's concert, she said, hey, I'm a beginner, I haven't played since high school, would you be willing to to teach me? So she was taking Irish fiddle lessons from Kevin and had been doing it for a couple years. And I was a new engineer, and I was like, "Oh wow, you play music? I've never played Irish music, but I'll play anything if because coming to a new community, and it's all one of the best ways to meet people and to kind of
Mm,
get involved is to play music." And I was at the point where I was like, sure, I'll play anything. So I composed some clarinet sort of counter melodies with the fiddle, and I played my recorder, and she said, Rob, you're just working way too hard. You need to just play the melody on a whistle. And so
mm,
she gave me a whistle, and it's like I did, and it's like, wow, it is a lot easier, but this is the $10 piece of crap, and I used to
mm.
play instruments that I've dedicated my life to that are a little bit more
Right.
um,
Of a certain caliber.
yeah, so I just like it got me thinking that maybe I could improve it. And this was a long time ago. I mean, there's a lot of good whistle makers now, but back then, this is kind of even before the internet, so it's not like I had access to buy really high quality whistles because I, you
Yeah.
know, I was just getting into Celtic music and Irish music, and you know, Cindy knew about good fiddles and fiddle playing and stuff, but we weren't. I wasn't probably in the playing out with other people yet or going to sessions or anything yet. I was just trying to get some chops behind me, and it it's nice. I liked Celtic music because you could play it in a bar, much like punk music. So it's a real grounding, experience. You can have a beer and stay up late, and it's nice, but it's not loud and angry. So I didn't have to be angry at the man anymore.
Gotcha.
I could get my bar music fix, and my ears wouldn't be ringing when I came home, and it was more of a community than a statement. And I I still appreciate all of it, but it felt like a type of music I could play into my older age and still have a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
That's
Hey, friends, you probably heard enough about it. I'll be really quick. I just wanted to pop in here real quick, like in the middle, say that, of course, I hope you're enjoying this interview. I had a lot of fun talking with Rob. He's a very cool person and makes cool instruments. But I wanted to remind you that this episode is coming out on the Saturday before St. Patrick's Day. So right now, as I'm recording this, tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day. And that's the day that we are going to do the drawing for the Peace Through Music International benefit album that we've done to celebrate having 100 episodes. So hop over to Bandcamp. There will be a link in the show notes. If you haven't got a copy yet, get a copy quick, because on St. Patrick's Day, tomorrow, we're just going to take everybody who's bought albums so far, and we do have that mechanism built in, so if you paid more than the asking price for the album, you will be entered multiple times. And we're going to do that drawing. We've got tons of cool stuff. There's the MK Kelpie whistle. There the whole stack of generation whistles in different keys, including some of the highland bagpipe fingering style whistles. The Maverick practice chanter, a bunch of reeds from Adrian Melvin, online instruction from Get Bagpipe Ready, and Bowron lessons from Blaine Chastain. Bagpipe swag gift cards. What else? Guitar accessories from Didario. Some swag items from Peace Through Music International themselves, a whole bunch of stuff. So if you haven't got a copy yet, hop over there and grab a copy quick so that you'll be in the drawing. And the album won't disappear after that, of course. This is just, the quickness is for sake of the drawing. And then we'll tally up everything that's been made to up until now at that point, and just let everybody know what we were able to raise for Peace Through Music International. I'm real excited about it. So thanks again for supporting that, and thanks for enjoying the show and for tuning in, and I hope it's an enjoyable experience, and have a great day. And if you're gigging for St. Patrick's Day, stay safe, and here's to a very prosperous round. May the tips be large and generous, and may they come often. Thanks again. Have a good one. And I don't think that this is necessarily needs to be this way, but I think that probably at least outside of really specific communities, probably if you grew up on the Iberian Peninsula, maybe your first thought when you hear bagpipe would be the Galician gaita or
right.
the Italian zamponia or something like that, right? But probably a lot of places, at least in North America, you hear bagpipe, you think Scottish Great Highland
Oh
bagpipe,
yeah.
and you're surprised to find out there are other kinds of bagpipes, And so I suspect that it's a very unique thing for you as a person living in North America to have gone whistle, gaita, then other stuff, not
and
Highland bagpipe practice chanter first,
That's why I kind of forgot where the question was going, but to get back there, and thanks for bringing me back home.
That's what I'm here for. No
Yeah,
sweat.
yeah. So, we were beginning to gig and found out that we could actually make pretty decent money. I think Irish Celtic music is also a genre that you can make, especially around St. Patrick's Day, but pretty much year round. We could get gigs and get paying gigs, where that was
Mm-hmm.
a little more challenging in rock and roll, because you had to have your crowd and they had to come out, and then you had to get a following, where you could show up and play Irish music in a pub, and you know everyone
Yeah.
knew what to listen for, and you had a long set that you get free beers and food all night too.
Yeah.
But anyway, Cindy went to France. I don't know if you've ever been to Brittany, but they have a festival, Lorient Celtique
Oh yeah.
International.
I've never been, but I've watched videos from it. Yeah.
Yeah, so she went there one summer and came back with a bunch of French Celtic tunes, and then
Nice.
we added
Yeah.
them to our repertoire. And it's at the time I was wanting to investigate a little bit of my own cultural heritage. My last name is Gandara, and I knew it was from Spain, but I didn't know much about it. And then as I
Mm.
researched it, I found that it's a Gallego name from Galicia, and I was like, and I was also beginning to do a lot of. Well, I had beginning to. I was doing more and more bicycle touring, so I
Oh,
trip to the UK. I'd done a trip over through Glacier National Park. So I was like wanting to do a bike tour of Spain and probably do the region that my name was from, and then finding out that there was a Celtic tradition there, and then finding out that there were bagpipes. It's like, well, Cindy can go to France and bring back fiddle tunes. I can go to Spain, and on my bike I went, and I can maybe bring back a gaita, and we can add it to our band and
oh,
become
that's awesome.
international Celtic style. So basically, I did, and I came back with. I didn't come back with a pipe because and this was the 90s, because I kind of, in my broken Spanish, which I also had been learning and also wanted to practice, which was the other reason I'd gone to Costa Rica and taken a couple intensive language classes there
Mm.
for a couple weeks. So it was an adventure, and I went into a tourist shop in Santiago de Compostela, and I saw a gaita on the wall, and I said, "This is why I'm here." I said, "I want that gaita," and she looked at me and said, "Do you want to play?" And I said, "Well, yes, of course I want to play." And she goes, "You don't want that gaita." It's
Oh, gotcha.
like no, no, that's for the wall.
That's decorative. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not one that. So she gave me the card of Oli, and this is before cell phones, so I was on pay phones. During a siesta, I managed to get a hold of him, and his broken Spanish, my broken Spanish, and his very limited English, figured out where, that it was okay for me to come and talk to him, and went over all the woods and everything, and the number of drones, and I think it came to a price of 400 pesetas, and at the time, maybe that's $200 or $300, which seemed a lot to me at the time, especially for meeting a stranger to just give him this money. Well, no,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
didn't have it there. He was going to build it for me, so it was like, oh, I have to just
Right.
trust him and give him the money, and then expect that he's going to mail it to me. And it's like, maybe uh, you, it's not, it's just like, but my thoughts were, I came all this far, I'm not, if that's the case, then so be it, but this is a bagpipe factory, and he makes bagpipes, so why
Yeah.
why am I even worried about this? But he needed 50% down,
Hmm.
and I gave him, that much in cash, and had it ordered and everything, and then he was going to take him several months to build it. And then he proceeded to ask me if I needed a ride back to town. And then, oh, once we got to town, do you want to have a beer, a cognac? And then, oh, we got our language skills with each other got better and better. And he goes, oh, would you like to meet my girlfriend? And then he goes, oh,
I've heard before that like sometimes having that beer might actually have improved your language
it
skills
does.
mutually anyway, right?
Yeah. So, anyway, and he goes, oh, you want to meet some of my friends? I think I came to his house during the siesta at 3, and we went back into town around 4 or 5 when his girlfriend was getting off work. I ended up hanging out with him and his friends and eating and drinking, and he was buying for absolutely everybody in town till about 11 o'clock at night. And
Yeah.
I think he spent all my money.
I was gonna say, was that the cash you just barely handed him?
Maybe not all of it, but he spent a good bit of it just taking me out. So it's like, well, even if I don't ever get the bagpipe, I've got a good story to tell about it. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
but it did show up a few months later. So
What was that first? Was that and maybe it's worth pausing for a moment to describe the Galician gaita a little bit anyway, and
yeah,
maybe this is a good way to do it. Like, was that a single drone or two drone? Was it in do or in re? But
yeah,
maybe
it was your
since
basic single
yeah,
drone, and I don't even think it was made from the hardest wood. It was some other wood that he had that was a little less expensive, and it was single drone in do. It was in C, because they said that's the key, that all the pipes, that the traditional pipes are made in. That's all that
yeah,
everyone plays in Galicia.
Did you
Um,
find though afterward that maybe Ray would have been more compatible with the music you were doing with your band?
Oh, I had a lot of fun learning on that instrument, and I've been back to Galicia several times. He's become a really good friend. I see him every
Yeah.
time I go back, and I ended up next time I went. I think I was able to communicate with him a little bit beforehand, and I got a two drone gaita from him in
Mm,
D. So
yeah.
that one became, I think I got it a year or maybe 2 years after, but very quickly afterwards, just because Irish music is in D, and fiddles do prefer playing in D over C.
Yeah. And that's if anybody listening, just for sake of clarifying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I think that the reason you usually hear gaitas referred to as being in do or re instead of
Yeah.
C or D is just a remnant of a fixed do solfege system where do is always C, re is always D, mi
Yes,
is always
do,
E,
re, mi,
etc.
fa, sol, la, ti, do are
Right.
basically those notes, and in English we call them A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But in French and Spanish and other Latin-based languages, they actually have names, not letter values. So
And so then, could you maybe use this as a way to describe, like, assuming that what the bagpipes everybody's familiar with are the Scottish Great Highland bagpipes,
yeah.
what's different from those about Galician bagpipes?
So the Great Highland bagpipes are probably about the loudest bagpipes on the planet. They have a
Mm,
chanter that starts very narrow and goes very very wide, and so that taper kind of sets the volume of an instrument. So they have one of the largest changing, and so also people tend to play because they project so well, and people like the way they project. People like the reeds that you play on Highland pipes tend to be much harder,
mm,
so you'll play and so because the reeds are harder, the bags take a lot more pressure. So in Highland piping, you really kind of have to get in shape and stay in shape to keep playing. In other traditions of piping, there's not as much strength involved, so you don't have to overcome the pressure in the bag with your blow stick, and your arm is working at a lower pressure to play the instrument as well. One of the other differences is it's very loud. The gaita is not quite as loud as the Great Highland Bagpipe because it is higher pitched though. The C and the D
mm.
chanters are shorter than the Highland one. Also, when you play Highland, because it's a bigger chanter, you play with the middle joints of your fingers on the bottom hand, which is like a foreign language to like saxophone and clarinet players. And the gaita, because it's a smaller chanter and the little finger has an offset hole, you play with your tips. So basically, it's the same fingering as a whistle.
Mm.
If you're used to playing an Irish whistle, you can pick up at least the fingering technique for a gaita pretty quickly. The only other thing that's relatively different about the gaita is the thumb hole is an octave hole, so you can play into the second octave on a gaita chanter, and
Yeah.
the tone hole on a Highland chanter. So that's you open your thumb and that's the top note.
That is the thing that has most drawn me to gaitas, and the biggest reason I want to play gaita is
Yeah,
that extended range. I love that you had that experience in Santiago because that's the first exposure I remember clearly to gaitas being played was on that Chieftains album that they called
yes,
Santiago, or was it
yeah,
Pilgrimage to Santiago? Something about Santiago
yeah,
there.
yeah. Those
And
roads.
hearing the as being like, wait, now that's a bagpipe, but it's playing really big range. That sounds fun.
Yeah,
That's kind of the first thing that drew me to it.
right, and it's unique. I mean, I was reading a tour book, and it actually is absolutely true. You'll hear more piping, on the streets in Santiago de Compostela than you will in Dublin or Edinburgh.
Mm.
There's just pipers everywhere, and there's acoustic points in the city that people wait in line to play with because of the reverberation. It's a very small,
Oh,
compact city with all these old paths that were designed by you know today they're used by pilgrims, but they're not really in a grid format. So there's these little plazas that are in these holes and stuff that are incredible. So
that's really interesting because I know that, like, a lot of the gaita content that I've consumed on YouTube is of pipers standing like in narrow streets between two walls on either side and like narrow
Right.
pathways, that kind of thing. So there you go. That's why,
Yeah.
huh? They
Yeah.
probably are in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Huh. Huh. So then, Rob, like, did you? Because like I know that right now you're manufacturing gaitas, related whistles for gaitas, Highland bagpipes, Scottish small pipes. You also have a Galician small pipe, like a small pipe gaita. I've never seen those other than on your site. Is that an original thing to you, or am I just ignorant?
No, it is. It's kind of I don't know if I'd call it an invention, but it's sort of a collaboration of, okay, I make small pipes and I know the fingering and technique we use for the gaita, and it would be nice to have a small gaita that you could play with other people that's not
Hmm.
real loud. and
Yeah.
and so I've I kind of came up with one. It's once again, if you have the physics and the equations and know how the holes work. If you One of the things I like to be able to do is, if you tell me what notes you want an instrument to play, and give me a fingering chart that you want it to work, I can usually make an instrument to match that. So
That's so cool. That's like a superpower, Rob. That's so cool. I've done a little bit of tinkering myself, and it's like I know that if I make a drone longer and longer and longer, eventually it's not progressive anymore. It resets to another note.
right,
But I don't understand where that point is. I just like have to
yeah,
mess with it until it sounds right. But that
exactly.
you can actually like look at it and figure that out. That sounds like a cool superpower to me.
It's just some equations and some charts that I have, and I leveraged the equations a whole lot when I started the company, but now it's just like I kind of have a more intuitive feel, and I've gotten into
Mm.
I've developed a way to do angled inserts where I drill a hole at an angle and epoxy in a small carbon fiber tube to extend the chimney to a different point in the tube so that your finger can reach a hole that it normally wouldn't be able to.
Oh, yeah. Did I see those on your low whistles? Is that where I've seen
Yeah,
that
yeah, I use
before?
them
Those
on my
little.
low whistles quite a
Yeah.
bit, and my flutes as well. And I'm just beginning to sort of, I know I've, I've kind of redone some of my instruments, and it actually helps the resonance on some of the notes because it allows me to make the hole actually bigger. A lot of times, in order to make it playable by a human, you have to make the hole a little smaller than I would prefer to get the best sound out of it. But
Mm.
using this technique, I'm actually able to open up some of the tone holes and get a more even sound up and down the instrument on all the notes.
Wow, that's really cool. So there are a couple other like things that to me look innovative about your instruments, and like you feel free to tell me if this is just my ignorance speaking. But well, one thing is I have seen other makers also do like Highland bagpipe fingering whistles, but you seem to have done it very well. I've heard some people playing them and stuff, and that's I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but as a bagpiper, I kind of have laughed at myself sometimes for trying to get another practice chanter that would sound better, and I
Right.
realized, like, you know what? Practice chanters just don't sound good.
Yeah.
They just don't. To me, some
Yeah.
people love the sound of a practice chanter, probably. So the idea of having a whistle instead, that probably sounds a lot nicer.
Yeah,
Um,
I've done that, and then there's someone who came up with something called a highland hornpipe, and there was a
I
patent.
remember looking at those in the Lark in the Morning catalog when I was a kid. Have you made one
Yeah,
of those?
yeah, and someone sent me one, and they say, well, the body broke, and it's like, can you just do one out of carbon? And I looked at it, and it said, well, it says
Oh.
patent pending on it, so I'll do
Is
it
it
for
still
you, but
pending?
it has to basically be a repair. And so I kind
Yeah,
of reverse engineered the body and made it out of carbon. And so I was repair because he'd already bought one. I was
right.
I was improving his product, and then I went ahead on a lark and just kind of looked. There was, with patent pending, there's always a registration number with it, and I have a
Hmm.
patent on my Fipple design, so I've got access to some of the tools to look this stuff up. It's not too hard. And I looked it up, and it was basically it had been abandoned. So you have 7 years after you file a patent, provisional patent, to actually follow up with it, and he never had. So
Oh, gotcha.
that means it becomes public domain, and so now I kind of I make those. I don't sell like ton of them. I'm not marketing a lot, but it's a cool instrument. If you can play a saxophone mouthpiece, it's a lot of fun because on a
Yeah.
saxophone you tongue all your notes, and on a bagpipe you don't. So it gives the
Right. You could try,
saxophone
but it
the
wouldn't do anything.
difference. Yeah, it gives the saxophone, if you play it like a chanter, gives the saxophone a very different sound for the articulation. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's a lot of fun. If I was still in an active band, I'd probably find a tune or two to whip it out and change up the sound. I think it'd be a good addition to a set to have a different sound
Mm.
if you've been going droning on with your bagpipes for 2 hours. So
Yeah. I see too that you do some double whistles where there's a whistle drone on the one side and a whistle body on the other.
yeah,
Um,
those are a lot of fun too. It's basically two openings and two bodies. So you're going to control one with your fingers, and the other one's going to hold a note. It will jump octaves with you. There's a way to control it if you want, where it doesn't, or you can retard it a little bit. But I think
mm.
it sounds cool either way. The other thing is on a D whistle, you can play a lot of tunes in E minor. So the drone has a little piece of tape on it. You can take it off and put it on a different part of the body. So the drone will play an E instead of a D.
Oh, yeah.
And then it has that the D scale against the E sounds it's very medieval, very minor sounding. So
Mm.
I say the drone whistle has a happy mode and an evil mode, so you can when you want to play. So
This it reminds me of, and maybe this is my pitch to you to request a new product that I saw a while ago, a drawing of a design that, like, I've seen some people do bagpipe practice chanter or whistle walking sticks, where
oh
like a
yeah,
cap comes off and then
yeah,
it's an instrument. But I saw a drawing of one that had a double bore so that it could hold two reeds, so that one of
right.
the reeds was droning while you were
Oh,
playing
okay.
on the other one.
Yeah.
I don't know, enough carbon fiber to make a walking stick might be, an insane amount of carbon fiber, but
Well, it might not be too. I mean, as I've progressed with my stuff, I mean, all the bores and critical geometries I do mold by hand, but some of the other pieces there's enough people making just generic carbon fiber tubes and fittings that
Oh, sure.
I, you know, I could find something that would piece of carbon that could buy off the shelf that would work as a walking stick, and then put something on the inside of it. I mean, there's all kinds of
Yeah.
ways. It's a
Poke holes in it, something,
yeah,
right?
yeah, to merge it together. So
Yeah. What about the didgeridoos? When did you think, "Oh, I'll add that's a tube. I could do that too." Like, how did that
well,
happen?
my first, well, not my first, but one of the Celtic bands I was in a little bit later, after I had my gaita, it's just like it just kind of came to me that there's a drone on a bagpipe, and the didgeridoo is a drone instrument. And
Mhm.
so one of the early bands I formed after my first band broke up was a three piece. It was didgeridoo, fiddle, and gaita. When I would play
Mm.
the whistle on occasion too. But we basically a guy who made his own didgeridoos would cut them to length to match the drone on my bagpipe, and then it just kind of like I could. I don't know. It just seemed like a slide didgeridoo would be an even better option because then when we change
Oh,
keys,
yeah.
he doesn't have to
Yeah.
change didgeridoos and warm up another one. So I postulated what was two pieces. And carbon's nice because initially I was going to have it operate like a slide trombone, and you have oil, and then you apply it to it, and you apply water to one and oil to the other, and that way you get a nice seal. And that's how trombone slides work. But it
Mm.
turns out that the tolerances in making my instruments, I've got a good bit of industrial resources that I've kind of stumbled on, and one of them was a centerless grinder, and they can grind carbon to a very, very precise diameter, and since you mold it around a piece of steel or aluminum, the interior ID is also very precise. So I was able to. The first ones I hand sanded, which took forever and was quite laborious. But when I started using a centerless grinder, I could just send these parts out, and it said, I want you to make this tube slide freely, but not any smaller. So I would give them target specs, but ultimately the best thing to do was to give them the tube I wanted it to slide in, and they would just dial in half a thousandth of an inch until they got one tube to slide in, and then they'd run the whole batch. So anyway, I ended up developing a slide didge, and and this was for, I think the first person who tagged me and asked me to do it was Joseph Carringer out of New Hampshire, who was doing a sonic healing.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and he would look at people's chakras and play a didge and see where they were getting bigger. I haven't been treated by him. I've just met him briefly once in Braintree. I was flying through to a festival, and we just met up for 10 minutes. But he sort of commissioned that first didge, and then because if you go to a centerless grinder, they charge you because they have to set it up to do the grinding. They
Mm.
charge you the same amount if they do one tube as if they do 10.
So
So,
you figure might as
so
well.
I just said, well, I'm going to do this for him, and he's paying a little extra to make sure it's precise and everything, but I'll go ahead and get these other tubes ground too. And so
Yeah.
so I'm a manufacturing guy. When it's nice, it's been my career of like, well, sure, anybody can make something once, but how are you going to, if it's successful, how are you going to make more of them? So anytime
Yeah.
take on a project or trying to do something special for someone, I'm always trying, I'm approaching it as like, I'm not going to do this in a way that I'm not going to be able to repeat it, or that I can't reproduce it, or that I can't make a
Yeah.
them. So my approach is, and if you approach manufacturing from a repeatability perspective, you get much more consistent quality. So that's kind of
Mm.
where I go when I start to make. And when I was starting out, I probably had more time on my hands. So when people came to me with a project like, oh, hey, can you make a didgeridoo? It was easy for me to say yes. So newer projects now are they have to be within my bailiwick, or easy to do, or I
Mm.
have a personal passion. I mean, I wanted to learn how to play the uilleann pipes, and that they're not inexpensive instruments. So for me,
No, for sure.
that's at any time, and I invest in trying to get this instrument out the door and turn it into a product, is well spent, because there's already a tradition that these are instruments that deserve a lot of engineering and attention. So it's a time when it's well spent. So I did some research and found some old plans, joined the NPU, got involved, and went to Dublin and actually talked to Gay McCune about what he thought the best chanter was, and they were doing a lot of research on it then. So it's that became an instrument I wanted to start making.
Have you had the opportunity to play it a lot then?
Yeah.
That's one thing I've wondered throughout, just like, does the manufacturing take over all your time, or do you still get to play music?
Well, I'm not in a band anymore, so
Yeah.
I'm toying with the idea of maybe just the way to start a band is you just start practicing, and the way to keep people coming to practice is you set up a gig. So I'm on the verge where I'm probably going to try and start something here soon. But I it's important for me when I finish an instrument to allow myself time to actually explore it and play it and spend time on it. So I will sometimes get lost at my office just once especially after I've got a new reed and I'm working an uilleann set and trying to make sure it's playing the way I want it to.
Oh, do you read them up yourself?
I don't make the reeds, but because my chanter's so repeatable, Joseph
Yeah.
Sampson down in Bakersfield has one of my chanters, and so he'll try it in that chanter and get it right, and then mail it to me, and it's been a
Mm.
pretty successful relationship. So
Yeah.
So
So you do get to play a bit though. I interrupted you
yeah,
there.
I
So
do.
I mean, I feel glad to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it'd still be more fun to play in a band and try and not just get through a tune, but actually try and perfect it and arrange it and do all the other stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have to play the instruments when I'm done, and especially when I'm doing something new, it's like it's a lot of fun to just sit there
Mm.
and bang on it and see and just say, okay, yeah, this is it. This. I'm enjoying this. So this is something that other people will enjoy as well. So
Yeah. Well, as one of the people who is enjoying a Carbony flute, I can say it's true. The
thank
the flute's new to me, and it's been a lot of fun. And yours, I actually have it because a very generous and loving friend knows that I have 5 small children,
ah,
and I was learning to play the flute, and he sent me a Carbony flute and said, "Look, I'm glad you're learning it," because he plays flute as well as
right.
pipes and sings and does a lot of. He's an amazing musician. But he sent it and he said, I love that you're learning to play. I want you to keep learning to play, but so many little kids, it stresses me out,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
vicarious stress. And so he's like,
yeah.
here's an indestructible flute. And I'll tell you what, Rob, I've got a few scratches on some of the stainless steel trim because it is indestructible and my kids have played with it. And I like that because I want them to be curious and get there. I
Yeah,
don't want to be the household that says, no, kid, you can't touch the piano until you're
right.
older. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
no, and
so I
I'm that
like that
way
they
too.
can,
So I've got kids in my house, and we just got a piano, and it's like I've got an 18-month-old boy, and he just climbs on the bench and starts banging on it, and it's like, you know what? It's okay.
yeah.
that
How long, Rob, until you make a carbon fiber piano?
Oh, I don't know that's what the world is really needs right now. Piano's a string instrument. If I was going to use carbon fiber in the development of a piano, it would be it's I think it's best used for the stiff pieces. So it's maybe the frame.
Yeah,
So pianos are very heavy.
they are. Yeah.
So, but they have to be very stiff and very, very stable. So it'd be some of those pieces that I think it would be a good application. It may be on the
Mm.
hammers. That would be, so now you got me thinking.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Here we go. But to that point, Rob, I don't know if this is us coming to a graceful close or not, but I just wonder, like, I've got to imagine that having spent a lot of time not just making music and in listening to music and traveling for music, but also like in like hours and hours and hours of thinking about music as an abstract sort of idea, as well as like the very physical, very not abstract science of how to make the sounds happen. Like, have you pontificated to the point where you have like thoughts or things to say about the value or position or reason for innovation in instrument manufacturing, why it's important, what it's good for, that kind of stuff?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's an art, and like any arts, if it doesn't continue to progress and grow and get experimented with and challenged and poked at, and it begins to go back in history and become an artifact. So
Oh, from art to artifact. That's interesting.
yeah, yeah, and so it's kids will come up and they think my instruments are the coolest thing since sliced bread or something. But and some of the traditional, I don't even find the people who actually play music have no problem with what I'm doing. It's people who have a perception that I'm rocking the turnip cart or think
Yeah.
the traditionalists might not like it. It's like I asked them, "Are you a player? Have you ever had a cold day when your instrument just couldn't get in tune? Have you
Yeah.
ever traveled with an instrument and then gotten to where you're going to find out that it's cracked in half? Have you have
Yeah.
Is there an instrument that you have that you will take to a studio and play, in a temperature controlled environment, but are scared, but you keep it locked up and you're scared to take it anywhere else because it's just too valuable to you?" I think the more you work with music and instruments, the more open you are to newer and better and creative solutions. So, I've one of the things that we also learned in along the way, because I worked for relatively large companies, and rather than so you always want distinguish yourself and set your products and your company apart from other. You need some story to tell that makes your company different than anybody else's. So why would
Yeah.
someone buy from Carbony than say, from Walton or from Fadog or whatever? So you have to find your niche, and then
Mhm.
you have to explore and make sure that that advantage, that manufacturing advantage, that product advantage, whatever it is that defines your company, you, exploit it. Make sure people understand what it is, and then it's between the lifetime warranty and them staying in tune, and then resonating like wood. I mean, those are kind of the three angles that I harp on whenever anyone talks to me about my products. Um,
Mm.
Whistles, a lot of whistles are made of metal, and they're shrill in the second octave, and they're and that's traditionally how there is. I think I've kind of changed the instrument a little bit. It's not so shrill in the second octave. It's more balanced. It sounds more like a wooden instrument. And yeah, and what that means is people will own a Burke whistle when they want that metal sound, and they'll own a carbony whistle when they want a more blending sound, something that they might want to record with because it works better with other instruments. So
There's nothing wrong with more options, that's for
yeah,
sure.
and musicians love having, they'd rather have more instruments out there to choose from, you know
Yeah.
so
Well, and it does occur to me too that like, yeah, me speaking from, coming from specifically a very bagpipey background, very highland bagpipey
yeah.
background, like, okay, like what is the current quote unquote traditional material for highland bagpipes is African blackwood.
Yes.
Like let's pause for a second and think like surely that was an innovative material to use at some point not too far back in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Like they weren't making highland bagpipes in Scotland out of African blackwood
No.
way back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
Like that just
Yeah.
definitely wasn't happening.
Yeah. So it's true, and then you can get kind of caught up in that, and then you say, well, what are most chanters made out of? They're not made out of
Mm,
blackwood. They're made out of
yeah,
polypenco or delrin. So
yeah,
there's already been a transition in instrument making away from wood because of problems that it presents. So
yeah, yeah.